Objectives today would be to, let's try to understand the physiological response to conflict. I think that's a very good place to start because we cannot control, unless we have a lot of training, how to respond. And we want to also increase our awareness as part of the same objective and develop some skills to better deal with conflict. And finally, to stimulate just a better approach to conflict in our environments. And therefore the content would be a lot of topics like what is conflict and what is resolution. As briefly as I can, then the root of conflict, the cost of conflict. We usually think it's only paying for the lawyer, but it goes into a lot more other costs that are sometimes not even, you cannot put them in money terms, no? They're very expensive. Types and levels of conflict, physiological response, we'll stop a little bit more on that one. What would be a smart response to conflict? How can we start training ourselves to do more of that? Triggers and indicators, de-escalation techniques. We'll talk finally at the end a little bit about mediation. Well, okay, so then I guess I'll get right into it. What is conflict? And let me start with something I always find very... cannot look at the internet, seriously, props. So maybe we can show this at the end. Let me just tell them that I have better connect to internet. Let's see if I have internet. Because they... It says here that I have to... Okay, well, let me just let them know that I have no internet. We'll go with the, it's just a 1 minute video. I don't have internet today. Can you help me with that? Okay, but let's start with these very simple questions. Where can conflict happen? Where do we face conflict?
Everywhere.
Everywhere, right. Now, sometimes it may be more dangerous, more risky, or more notorious, but it happens pretty much everywhere. And what's the cost of conflict? And we have to put that, let's say, in some terms of how expensive it is. What would you say the least would be?
Time.
You're losing time. Relationships.
Lose your mind.
Your mind, actually, your health.
Money
Most
if
of
it's
it, stress.
money if it's litigation related.
Money and a lot more. So it's just really too expensive to not pay attention to it. Is it normal?
Yes.
Yes, please. Let me see. Like this. So it's very normal, and in animals it's very different than with us. Animals tend to respond with aggressiveness for, well, the flee or fight response. No? We are a bit more developed, and then therefore we should be creating other types of things that can give us more tools to just go with it. Is it good? Can it be good?
Can be.
Can be. When is it good?
When you're trying to work on a problem or something that's happening, maybe that's an issue, and you don't agree, and you have the conflict, and you solve the problem.
Right.
Then it's a good thing.
Okay. So then conflict generates change, one way or the other. It could be good or bad, pretty much depending on how we deal with it. Not necessarily the situation that we're facing, but how we deal with it. So it's a good thing if we do the right thing about it. And what types of conflict do we have? I would say it's pretty much interpersonal conflict, and then it gets all the way to countries fighting about things that we don't even understand. or religious conflicts, or all these other types of human interaction that create different types of conflict. Can it be prevented?
So you're good to go.
Yep, excellent. Thank you very much. So how can we prevent it?
Communication.
Okay. Acquiring these type of skills, being more concerned about the needs of others, and all these types, actually, it can give you a path to self-development, just understanding how to prevent conflict and how to really connect with others in terms of their needs. Let me start now with this, we'll continue with this models. And I guess we need to put Tony on no. Can you hear it?
A little bit.
And we're here to tell you all about the word conflict. Conflict. You guys ready to show conflict? Ready! Okay, here we go. Intuit Master showing us conflict.
Oh, sorry for that. I clicked it twice, it was only once.
Remotes are over there.
This is the Toolbox.
For the television.
We're here to tell you all about the word conflict. Right, conflict. You guys ready to show conflict? Ready! Here we go. Intuit Master showing us conflict.
Can you hear it back there?
If you could turn the volume up.
Well, it's just like coming from the computer. I thought it would be a need for this.
That was very nice. That was lovely. Sharing. That warms the cockles of my heart, but it's fuzzy to it. That was not conflict. No conflict. No conflict. I'm just sorry it wasn't.
So they're celebrating conflict. Okay, we're back to this one. So, let's talk about what's the root of conflict. And many people would blame the other party or lack of their abilities. When we start understanding conflict more on the deep level, we see that there's unmet needs. And therefore, we should take it that much personally. I think that the problem is not the other person. The problem is the problem, as Uri Weller says, about separating the people from the conflict would be very, very important, and understanding their needs. Of course, there's a lot more, and I would say the lack of communication, and empathy, and openness, basically understanding, lack of understanding on the other side, and sometimes even honesty and morality, validate the other person. Forgiveness can be a good source of well, I mean, to solve conflict or reduce it, de-escalate it. We'll talk about levels of conflict, because it can go from somewhere that it's just pretty much a game, nobody could be harmed, all the way where somebody can lose his life, or even a lot more people. And the good thing about the useful thing of this is that we can start practicing conflict. When we have a conflict level 1 or 2, it's creating the same, let's say, reaction on us than if we are in a conflict level. Hey, not so strong, but the same components are there. And then we can start controlling our anger and our frustration and start solving those conflicts first before we just attempt to work with our divorce or something like that. So this is a good place where we can practice in this safe, let's say, range of the thermometer with conflicts and practicing all these techniques that we're going to be looking at. And well, let's get to the physiological response. Have you ever felt like that? You want to throw that or something else to something or somebody else? Can we stop that feeling easily? It's like, it's a natural response. When I walk my dog and he just he's a friendly dog most of the time. But sometimes he just gets this reaction of having to bark really angry to some other dog. And you see how these little hairs in his back and his tail, they'll just jump up. And he cannot control himself. Although I'm sure that he wouldn't get into a fight. He's too small. I guess he will stop that, let's say, because of his own protection. But there's this stress response, and there's physiological changes on us. It's very difficult to stop crying, for instance. And how do we connect what's happening with having to have some water coming from our eyes, or changing our posture, or things like that? And if somebody says, don't cry, you probably will just start crying harder. So the same thing happens with other responses that are physiological. Maybe laughter is a lot more easier to control, but it's we need to get to train ourselves to see, oh, I'm angry now, let's change that response to something else, and we'll look into that. We usually get into a very aggressive or defensive style when we go through this natural physiological response. We have total distrust on the other side. We don't even listen anymore. We're just thinking of what I'm going to shout, or what I have to prove, or even more violent responses. We don't think that much either. We're just reacting instead of acting. And we even react knowing that there'll be consequences, but we will take the responsibility of dealing with them later, as opposed to stop the train of situations and take a better look. And we always blame the other side, and that's just natural. So all this is an automatic response from our reptilian brain, our limbic system, are very complicated things that really much, I guess, nobody understands. But what would be then a smart response to conflict? I put the operating room because there's no time for being mad at the nurse, or there's no situation you need to react with a lot of responsibility and put the conflict for later. And then it's a good example of how they control themselves. So the first thing would be control your emotions. If you're controlling that, you can increase your awareness. Once you realize it's not only what you're saying or what you're hearing, it's really much what's happening, even within you, in terms of losing control or feeling that heart beating faster, or the stomach, or any of those reactions that are so common. And then, of course, try to de-escalate. So if you are able to just say something that would bring back to the conversation to a more, let's say, listen attentively would also be very important. A lot of the things that you need to do when you're in conflict is just releasing what the other party is saying. I would go with these 7 principles: listen first, talk later, communicate effectively, find common ground. Once you find common ground in a conflict, then you can work collaboratively. It's like, okay, now we can talk each other about those common interests, and maybe move to these other situations that are not so simple or not so easy for later. We can stimulate collaboration any way we can, like maybe saying, okay, let's bring our own ideas in writing for next time, or let's see something that would invite people to collaborate other than fight. And be empathic. So this is important because many times we get into the fight, like the important thing is to fight as opposed to solve the conflict. It's just our reaction, and even the culture looks like that. And every information we get from entertainment all the way to politics is like, I'm not interested in anything, I need to prove to you that I'm stronger, that I'm number one, that I have to win, regardless of the way, even through, I don't know, military equipment or whatever, no? So remember, first is to de-escalate, and it's not about the fight. And then think, what else can I do? Because it's not working, what else can I do? And of course, we will not be able to change the other person, we can try to change ourselves. So if you look more, let's say, just more empathic, or more able to understand somebody, or just recognize something, that they will help you de-escalate. Even if you are losing apparently, because you are giving a lot more, let's say, benefit to the other side, you'll be able to go back into collaboration. Now, more about the physiological response. This is the human brain, and we have this. They say there's 3 brains in our brains. The first one would be this reptilian brain, and then the animal brain, and finally the human brain. And as we have our, let's say, inside over there, it's reacting with all these chemicals and putting them in our bloodstream and doing all that. We have to counterbalance with our neocortex, the brain that really makes us different from animals, and understand that there's options, there's things I can say, and all of this is spawning into those reactions that we can hardly stop. So then we need to activate our neocortex brain to counterbalance this physiological response. Happens with people that get trained as police officers, for instance. They have to train themselves losing fear. Or with medical emergency teams, they have to react I don't know, just go and do the right thing every time you have a situation. And I guess we can do the same thing with our physiological response. Learn how to control it. And of course, then those triggers that we have, where we start feeling the pressure or the blood pumping or the fist putting it straight, or we don't even like to listen to the other side, should be triggers to also open up our neocortex brain. So don't let those reactions take you to the wrong path. Those reactions can also make you know that you have to change your strategy. And in that, when you're feeling one of those triggers, you can say, well, let's see, what do I really want for myself? Is it really the $10 that this guy owes me, or I know whatever the conflict might be? What do I really want for the other party? Do I really want to die right now? And the really is a very important word. Because it's not what do you want, well, I want him dead right now because he's just unreasonable. But if you add the really, you probably would say, well, no, I don't really want anything bad for him to happen. I just would love that he understands my perspective, which is a much more de-escalated way to see the conflict. What is the right thing to do? That brings our value system to also take it into account. What do I really want for that relationship? And that might include children when we're talking about divorce mediation or something like that. So, and then the final answer would be, how would I behave if I really want these results? So then you have some homework, and once you respond on this, now what should be my behavior? Many of the times conflict happens because of miscommunication. So we all have this. It's like we don't really learn how to communicate effectively. So therefore, people that think they're very reasonable and very friendly, or you can be, but at the same time, you might be interrupting or criticizing or name-calling. And of course, that even gets worse when people are disrespectful from the start, or they just think that they are doing the right thing and interrupt and whatever. All of these practices or situations can worsen the communication. So try to stop all of these common mistakes. Are we aware of them? Are you? When you get into any of these, are you aware you're doing them?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Many times we're not. And then the other party would say, well, it's just that you keep on interrupting. Well, no, you are the one interrupting. There's another conflict to add to the other one. Go ahead.
What do you mean by diagnosing?
Well, you are wrong. You did this last time the same way. You have no idea of what to do. All of those type of diagnoses. That oftentimes, I can, for instance, have this experience with my brother. Many times I call him, he always has only listened maybe a couple of sentences of the whole situation I would like to share with him. But even before I finish the 2 sentences, he says, oh, you did it again, you don't know anything about this. It's like, you don't listen. Well, you don't even know what's going on. And he's already diagnosing something on my situation. It's easy to jump into diagnostics or just to tell you what you were doing wrong without even really analyzing it deeper. So doing that is it brings consequences to escalate the conflict because they haven't even understand the problem. And it's like you only want some feedback when you really ask for it. So before diagnosing or any of that, maybe asking, can I give you some feedback of what I think? Can I tell you something that maybe you don't like to hear? Or would you be able to understand other perspective? I mean, something that's inviting for them to say, okay, go ahead. But if you say it without permission, let's say, without any request, it will just escalate. Same thing about moralizing. I know parents do that a lot, and children get pretty sick of that. And excessive, inappropriate questions, or where you are just putting them in the bench of you have to respond this and almost even some light in their face, because that's what they need to do, and advising too. You should do this, you should do that. And I find that to be a little bit like diagnosing. You're not really certain of what's the situation, and now you're telling them what to do when they haven't asked you. So something that works is if you say, what I've done in situations like that is, and then you throw your idea. But it's not saying you should do this. It's something I've done when I've faced something similar. And then the advice is most likely much better received. And well, basically there's these common improper styles of being coercive, of showing power, of being manipulative. And it works sometimes. We see that, I mean, it brings discipline, it brings the results that you might like, but you're only creating enemies, and it works really much only on the short term. So what can we do instead? And here are some of the techniques that we can use in those low-level conflicts. Even conflicts that are not of our own. We can simulate conflicts that are simple. We can see them elsewhere and start doing this exercise. That reflecting. What does reflecting mean? Reflecting would be, go ahead.
Looking at it.
No, reflecting would be to do a little bit of the same you're doing, and even saying what you said.
Oh.
So I'm reflecting, I'm having the same posture, I'm just making you feel more comfortable with reflecting. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
So showing that you understand what they
Yep.
can say.
Say, yes, I understand, something that you're somehow reflecting. Many times in conflict, you say something and the other person responds with something that most likely like an aggression to that, and this escalates. If the action, if you say something and I rephrase it, then the communication cycle is complete. Because my intention when I say something is I'm putting it in a package and sending it to you. And if I get response from you that you got it, maybe with your posture, or hopefully with something you say, that's actually rephrasing. And it could be a short summary of what I said. That's a very powerful way to really build a different environment around conflict. And then clarify, say, if I understand you are upset because I didn't call you when I was last, whatever. And then she or he would say yes. Okay, so then yeses are very important in conflict, because it's normally no's. But if you have a yes, so you're upset because of this? Yes, I'm okay. So now we got a yes in the conversation. So you can continue with some comments or questionings that will add to this collaboration. Reframing and validation. That's reframing is like you have a frame, and then you have the same picture. Let's say student doesn't want to go to school, and that's part of the conflict. And it sits there in this frame where you say, well, that's really bad. He should go to school. This is all wrong. And then you reframe it. So you change the frame. The picture is the same. The guy doesn't want to go to school. But now you can say something like, oh, I know I think that then your time is important to you. Just anything else. And then he would say, yes, the time is important for me, and that's the reason I don't want to go to school.
I have to read you what's on this shirt.
Sure.
I took a picture of this guy's shirt. This is under one of these, probably clarify, apologize. It says, I'm sorry, my fault. I forgot you were an idiot.
Yeah, that's easy to win.
So that's one way to do it.
Of course, humor can help.
That's the conflict.
Depends if you can say that with no elevation. So reframing would be to change, to bring some of the values of that other person, like he doesn't want to go to school, but change that in a way that his time is important to him. And then it's not about going to school or not, it's about how to best use the time. So that de-escalates conflict. Validate. I can really see, I was the same way when I was your age. I didn't want to go to school. It's perfectly normal, especially with schools the way they are now. I think it's even worse. And of course, learn about communication, negotiation, leadership skills. Just keep on reading about these topics. We can also have techniques by system, let's say physical techniques, which means how I distribute the room, if we have coffee or some cookies when we have a conflict, that might de-escalate. The way I put the chairs in front of them facing each other, we can put them on the same, let's say, directed to somewhere else, can help us feel different than being opposed to something. They could be mental, it could be emotional. If you bring philosophical principles, those are all techniques that you can bring into conflict that can help you, again, de-escalate and create collaboration. And, well, again, the awareness component is actually very important. Many people say this is the key element also for self-development, for being more conscious about what's happening, to develop that awareness of what happens around us and within us. And you can increase that awareness by going to the balcony. I don't know if you've heard that term. Let's say that I'm fighting with somebody about anything, and I'm losing control. Then going to the balcony means instead of being in the fight, instead of being first person, I'll move to be third person. So I'm going to try to see me doing that. Even if I have to say, hey, give me a minute, I don't have to walk away, it's just this imagination of you going to the balcony that can give you a little bit more time and another perspective of things. Get to know yourself in conflict. Know that you can be losing control that easy, or what are your triggers. Just get to know yourself. And remember, the problem is not the problem. The problem is the problem. It's not the other person. It's not about the fight. Always try to de-escalate. And then, of course, bringing your values in, or the policies of the company, or something that will give you a really strong ground base. So how do we call that? The structure of things. No? So the machine keeps working, and you just buy time that way. And then practice building skills, like for instance, doing these awareness things. It's something you can practice. Just be aware of this room, for instance. I'm talking, and what's happening around you. Can you somehow imagine what's happening behind you, even if you don't have your eyes on them? Then you just be aware of the temperature and be aware of the reality. Forget about what's happening at home. Forget about what you have to do next. Just be aware of this exact time where many things are happening. And increasing that exercising can be very useful during conflict. You can often analyze that conflict experience. So you can go to the back to your own book or to anybody's book. Say, what happened there? Well, he lost control. Okay, he lost control. Why? Well, because, especially if you were a witness or you have more elements to analyze it. But analyzing conflict is a good way to see what happened, where they lost control. How did they go to that level of conflict when there was so many other options? And work more on the process than the content, because it's easy to take sides. So if there's a conflict between two people, you would say, oh, well, she's right. I mean, after all, this guy was always late or shouting to her. But don't get into that, let's say, taking sides. It's more interesting to say, oh, well, when he shouted, she started crying, and that made him angrier, or something like that. Just analyze what's happening with them. Explore your own triggers, your thoughts, the issues. There's a very interesting, let me see, I think I have it here. If we have time, we'll show that. But it's very interesting to check on the issues and the position. So for instance, an issue would be, I don't know, let's talk about one of children not going to school or homeschooling, or any of that. That's the issue. What's your position? Well, my position is that children should go to school regardless of how good or bad the school is. They should be going there because that's their obligation. And my position might be different about the same issue. My position might be, well, it depends on the teacher, or depends on how he's enjoying it, or whatever other position. So we have a conflict. There's the same issue with two different positions. But if those positions are somehow, we find a common ground, like saying, okay, well, we want the best for that student, or that child. Is that a common ground? Yes, it is. Okay, so then we can actually see that the issue has some overlay, and then we can start working for that common objective into the more details of how can we do that. Well, he needs to go to school. Well, if the school is not the best way to educate him, can we talk about other options? Or can we just at least see if there's some other options there? And start building upon this common ground. And have fun at the same time, because it's not your conflict. It's not something that you need to feel that bad about it, but you can somehow find jokes around it, enrich your repertoire, and stand out, like actually simulate it, with a conversation with somebody else taking the other role. I guess, Tina, you can find a lot of examples as you work with conflict, and maybe you can actually say, okay, we're going to use this example to simulate something, and people take those roles again and redo the conflict. But now it's a conflict that you can say, time out, let's see. Let's analyze this at this right time. What else could you say? Or how do you feel? Or what is happening? That would be a very interesting way to train yourself. And of course, study about all these topics. Now, I would like to talk about the difference between mediation and litigation, because it's a common understanding that lawyers can be very good mediators. They themselves, they say that. They have been trained to litigate. That's their training. They've been in school for that. And that means they will always start with that. Litigation means that you have to go to the past and find proof of what happened, and affidavits and witnesses, and check on the law, and bring this thing to the court, and just be in that very clear past, when mediation goes to the future. So in mediation, we promote collaboration, we promote a conversation, we try to de-escalate. Lawyers don't really care about de-escalating. They just promote this other perspective. And I really think lawyers are doing a great job in many aspects. They are very important. Law is essential to any of these conflicts. But I would say there's a clear difference between litigation and mediation. And I've been through the process of getting divorced, and it's really painful. I experienced every one of these ones, so I guess it was not only me. It's people that go to a contended divorce, they would worsen their relationship, almost by definition. They are having to work on with their lawyers as opposed to with the other person. And parties have control of mediation. They can stop it at any time. In the litigation, you can get confused with this legal ordeal that only they know, and you you're not going to stop the law. It's confidential mediation, which means what happens in that room would stay in there, and it wouldn't in litigation, anybody can go in the courthouse and listen to what's happening, or they can go into these public records and see what happened in each of these sessions. There is a reduced time and cost with mediation, and oftentimes you get into a financial crisis when you have to stay with a lawyer for long enough to see that every hour counts, every 15 minutes. There's very little paperwork through mediation, because actually it happens through the conversation, and people are able to come up with a consensual and written agreement. So on the litigation side, there is a lot of paperwork. Mediation is voluntary, so people that agree to have a mediation session can walk away anytime. In fact, they can even go back to litigation with no consequence. If they go through litigation, then everything is forced. You need to be in that hearing, you need to be doing this document, everything is forced. And mediation is thought-provoking. It's trying to create more creativity, or bringing more ideas to the table. The other one is just wait to see what happens and hoping that the judge or some things will happen that will go the way you want. In mediation, we have a consensual agreement. Both sides are agreeing on something that they decided was best for them. In the litigation, is an imposed agreement that just falls in front of you. So, many times, mediation is now required to be done in cases of divorce, for instance. The thing is, many times that mediation session is done by the same lawyers through something, or with another mediator that's a lawyer. So they do what's called a settlement conferencing, which means both sides are in a separate room, and both of them are represented, and they are just back and forth talking about basically legal things that have to be solved. But it doesn't have to do anything with really how that couple can continue to be parenting, for instance, or what's important for them in the future. So it's good to have this option of mediation early on in a conflict, as opposed to when it has already escalated to the level of bringing things to the courthouse. It doesn't mean lawyers are not important. Actually, it would be a great place to start with having some advice, but not being represented. So you're reaching out for what would be the responsibility, or what the law says under this type of conflict. It would be very useful to know. But at the same time, when you say, okay, represent me for this fight, then the lawyer will be only trying to help you and not the whole system. And then you're limited in your actions because he's representing you. So basically, that's what it, we still have 15 minutes. Let me see. This is something I think we can help people de-escalate interpersonal conflict. Well, let me see. The idea is that you can work with your own conflicts without the need of mediation. That would be actually the ideal, and everybody's attempting to do that, but they don't practice all these, let's say, techniques and resources, and then suddenly the conflict has escalated to a level where they think there's no other way. So the more we learn about these techniques and these readings, you will be able to improve your relationships, solve most of the conflict. But if you don't, at some point, then mediation would be an option that can become more naturally than if we are saying, no, I'm going to fight first, and I'm going to prove this, and I'm going to spend all my money in letting them know that this was wrong. That's a path that we usually take, as opposed to stop and think, okay, do I really want to fight, or do I really want to get this into another approach? So therefore, we help people de-escalating interpersonal conflict and reaching them into a consensual and written agreement through just facilitating a respectful and productive communication. And it doesn't have to be divorce cases. Actually, I think this can work great, for instance, in different family type of environments. Teen parent mediation, for instance, 2 generations clashing pretty much on different topics, and none of them are able to move from there. Developing these skills first in them, and if needed, having them some type of mediation services would be very valuable to pretty much conflict in workplace, in family. So I put marriage up top. I don't know if you see that. It says marriage instead of divorce, because I think mediation should go before the divorce process starts. Maybe towards that direction, because there's no much more to, it's almost, gone. So that's what we do in Skagit Mediation. Now let me show you something here that I have in terms of these models. For instance, this is the conflict evolution curve. So the x-axis is time, and we have a threshold, which is one of those triggers that makes us think that the conflict is elevated. The lack of self-control is on the y-axis. So if you are down there, you're good. You can think, you have self-control, but something happens that we reach that threshold, there's a trigger, and we start losing our self-control. It's like the dog having these hairs coming up. We start sweating, or we start feeling like angry, and we feel frustrated, and now we want to shout. And that means we are escalating on the conflict, and we get to a crisis, and that crisis can even mean some domestic violence or something really nasty. Then we sort of recover from that, and we would then be much more ready for a negotiation phase, where I should be actually talking to the other side, as opposed to do it when it's escalating, when it's going down with the other. And sometimes this depression can mean that after one of those crises, we cannot even have our stomach is still bothering us. We cannot sleep, we feel upset, we cannot even go to work for sometimes, I don't know. It's really of consequence. So we need to bring that curve as flat as possible. Something that happens also when we are in a crisis is that our cognitive ability, the one ability to think, the ability to take decisions that are wiser for us, it's really much at a lower level. So it's important to know that, because you shouldn't solve conflicts when you are in a crisis. You should always buy some time. Say, well, we'll talk about this later. Get ready for some conversation. That will not be easy. And this is the one we were talking about. Well, this is also interesting. Maybe you've seen this model somewhere else, but it says on the x-axis we have the focus on relationships and other person agenda. So people that can care very much about the other one, like grandmas, or very nice people that would just say, I don't care of losing money, I'll give him what he wants. So they are more interested in the relationship itself or in the agenda of somebody else than their own. And they would be accommodating every time. On the other side, we have people that say, no, it has to be this way, and I'm not going to give any of this, it has to be the whole thing. And they would fall onto this competing type of approach or personality. And when you care about the other person, but you care about yourself, then you would be collaborating, or at least compromising. Say, okay, well, let's do this in a way that we both lose the same amount, or we pay the same amount. Avoiding is somebody that prefers not to deal with any of these issues and just stays away from the conflict. Now, many times we think those are styles that you say, ah, he's always competing. Oh, she's very accommodating. So it can go within our nature to be in any of these places. But it also can be a strategy. So if you have to talk to a neighbor that's completely crazy, which strategy would you use?
Avoid.
Avoid it. If you have your some family or relative sick at home that he's needing an ice cream and she shouldn't have one because it's not good for her, what would you do? But she's really needing that ice cream. Maybe you would say, okay, well, accommodating her. I don't know, even if it's a very expensive ice cream. Competing, if you feel that if your 5-year-old is throwing everything in the ground and he's not following the rules of putting things where they belong, you most likely would say, no, this is not about you wanting to do whatever you want, this is the rules in the house, and maybe doing that. If you like somebody and you have an interesting project to do, you would be eager to collaborate, saying, oh, what are your ideas? These are my ideas, let's take no ownership on this. And maybe if you're selling or buying a car, well, you'll get into compromise. So these are important strategies that can help you also when you're thinking, how should I respond to this? But after some thought, not just because it comes from your style. And this other one is very interesting too. We still have 8 or 10 minutes. This one is, the position is on the top of the triangle, but the issue is the whole triangle. So let's say, again, let's talk about an issue. You can give me an example of any type of issue in the community or out there. Death penalty.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about something like, okay, death penalty, would that be an issue? Yeah, it's a huge issue. Now, what is your position? What's my position? And they can be completely opposite. Or they can be somehow in the same range of saying, well, it depends on this and depends on that, and we can have a conversation about that. Now, in that position, having that position, first, this is something that can move. I can move my position. Let's say the position A is something that's completely, well, not completely, just very much in favor of the death penalty. And the position B is somebody that's very much opposed to it. They would have a common ground, most likely, of saying, well, under these circumstances, can we both agree that this would be okay? Well, yeah, so then that's a common ground. But depending on what proofs you bring, or what elements, what research is made, then you can move from one side, actually, to pretty much the other side, just by validating and understanding more detail, rather than just, this is my position, I'm going to stay here. No, well, let me see, this position makes sense. And that's the conversation that can help you move into this. The horizontal line there above Y, which means that you can only see a certain aspect of that position. For instance, in death penalty, I can say, well, I know I'm opposed, which is truth, I'm opposed. But you don't know why. And maybe I can tell you, well, because it just makes more sense. And you get to see a little bit of the iceberg. But you don't really know if I have somebody in jail that's making me think that way so he can save his life. Or something that's a huge part of that why. So that why is very important. Why is your position that? And then that question can be helping you to actually build more common ground. The other person might have a different level of how transparent he is. So you can see more of his why when he stands in that position. And it's always good to know more about that why. So asking empathic questions about that why could be a very good way to understand their needs, to maybe adapt their positions, and hopefully build some common ground and collaboration. And I guess that's pretty much everything I have prepared for you. I would love to have some comments or questions. Yes?
I was wondering, and what is the MIS design? Is that what we just looked at?
No. Management Information Systems is that type of things. And that would be like the necessary procedures to, or just policies, paperwork, formats, any of those things that can help you manage information, and that would be de-escalating, or at least preventing conflict. Because there's already a procedure to follow on this and that, and it makes no sense that they're arguing about this, because it's already, you have to read that manual and follow the procedure. So that's something that is a good way to prevent or even solve conflict once they start happening with systems like that. Good question. Anybody else?
Can you give us an overview or tell us a little bit about your classes?
My classes?
The 1 week sessions.
I'm not sure I followed the question.
Do you teach a week-long mediation training?
No, I did some workshops that were a few hours. Basically, the content was the same as we're doing now, but it would be a workshop where people can actually know themselves in conflict, for instance. So, trying to make it fun. It's not about you having to open up with your very deep or intimate situations, but more like, okay, we have a conflict of, I don't know, waitress and a client. And let's pretend that this is happening and start practicing with some of this conflict. And of course, anybody can bring any type of conflict and start analyzing them. So it will be more of actually knowing yourself in conflict and preparing yourself for actually this effort. Let's say you have a conflict that's not allowing you to, well, live comfortably or enjoy staying at home or any of these things. What can you do based on this? And then you have to prepare yourself with maybe some research, maybe understanding what's the issue first, and then what's your position, and then reflecting with somebody else, how would you be able to get that conversation going. So I did that already a couple of times. I'm having a workshop in Anacortes on the 3rd of October, October the 3rd. It's only 2 hours and a half, but that will bring us some of that intention of working together with some ideas like this. Does that answer your question? It's going to be on the 23rd of September. It's going to be a free session of half an hour, 5:30 I think. And then on the 3rd of October, it will be $50 workshop in Anacortes.
And we can find that on your website?
My website is not where I would like to have it. I'm working on it, but I can certainly email you information about that.
Okay.
I'll be happy to. So do you think some of these can be applied right away in your day-to-day? Not that you have much conflict.
A lot of good reminders too, that we've heard before, that it's good to
Right.
be reminded.
Right. And that's the reason for this. Hopefully you won't need a mediator. The idea is that everybody would be able to solve their issues without that help. Sometimes it's just, okay, now I've attempted this and this and that, and we need some impartial person here taking some action, then we'll be happy to assist in any case. Well, my intention is to really open up this topic, discuss it, even in itself, without trying to apply these techniques. Just this conversation shared with other people about conflict and what's happening, what's the cost, and what do they think, and what type of techniques do they know, how do they react, or just any of this. Share it with anybody and any age. I think we should bring these techniques and this understanding to even elementary school students. That it would reduce bullying, it would reduce a lot of this very, let's say, concerning environment that sometimes they are facing. Develops teamwork and develops just more interest in collaboration. I can speak for hours. I know it's already 1 o'clock.
Yeah. Good job.
Thank you very much, sir.
Well done. Well done.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's some brochures here and my card if you need it. And I'll see you.
This is good.
Thank you very much.
On to the next thing.
On to the next thing. Thank you very much.
What's the next?
The next thing, I am, well, trying to get a very big email to explain all kinds of things to all kinds of people that has to be clear. Kind of dumb through.
Oh, I gotta love those kind of emails.
I know. Would, I just take it around the office, would you